The Clone Wars era Republic Navy is usually remembered by fans due to its Venator-class Star Destroyer, an iconic warship that acted as the Navy's backbone. But there was another ship that was just as important as the Venator, the Acclamator-class assault ship, a heavy cruiser that served both as a frontline warship and a troop transport. Jedi generals generally favoured the larger Venator over the Acclamator, but believe it or not, the Acclamator was the better ship by far. In fact, the Acclamator was one of the most overpowered ships of the Clone Wars, and in this video, we're going to explain why.
Attention, Sergeant on deck!
Unlike the Venator-class and Victory-class Star Destroyers, which were products of the mid-war Victor initiative, the Acclamator was commissioned directly by the Kaminoans as part of the Clone Army project. They hired the Kuat Drive Yard subsidiary Rothana Heavy Engineering to design a next-generation warship, a fitting complement for what they believed would be the most powerful army the galaxy had ever seen. Rothana gave the Kaminoans their dream ship, setting design trends that would live on in KDY's infamous Star Destroyer line. Unlike most warships, the Acclamator-class wasn't primarily designed for naval combat. Instead, it was designed to spearhead planetary invasions. Its job was to destroy key enemy fortifications from orbit, descend into lower atmosphere to disgorge swarms of gunships carrying the first wave of ground troops, and then land and deploy the rest of the army once the landing zone was clear. In the early days of the Clone Wars, it was mostly used as intended and to great effect. No separatist ship could match the impressive mass deployment capabilities of the Acclamator. As the war went on, however, the Acclamator found itself pressed into other roles as well. During the first few months of the war, before the Venator-class Star Destroyer was deployed, the Acclamator served as the backbone of the rebuilt Republic Navy. This was by necessity. The Acclamator was simply the only warship the Republic had in suitable numbers. But the Acclamator filled this new role well. In early Clone Wars space battles, these assault ships proved a match for the Confederacy's Lucrehulk-class core ships, though they struggled against some of the larger separatist vessels. Later in the Clone Wars, a number of radically different variants of the Acclamator appeared. Before the deployment of the Venator, some Acclamators, like the Navuta B, were modified to act as starfighter carriers, while others, like the Prosecutor, were made into more generalist ships that had a fairly even mix of hangar space, troop capacity, and firepower. Late in the war, the Republic deployed an Acclamator-2 model which closely resembled the stock model but was intended for extensive orbital bombardment instead of troop deployment. All told, the Acclamator was a very adaptable ship, and this made it invaluable to the Republic Navy, which was struggling to rebuild itself from scratch in the midst of a war after 1,000 years of non-existence. The Acclamator-class assault ship, formerly classified as a heavy cruiser, was 752 meters long, distinct with its wedge-shaped hull, thin aft tail fin, and conning tower-mounted command bridge. The Acclamator was incredibly fast for its size. It was capable of reaching 3,500 Gs in space, and it featured a hyperdrive with a 0.6 rating, which made it one of the fastest ships in hyperspace. To compare, the Venator-class Star Destroyer had a 1.0 hyperspace rating, while the fastest ship ever made, the Millennium Falcon, had a 0.5, just a tenth of a point faster than the Acclamator. This incredibly powerful hyperdrive allowed the Acclamator to rapidly deploy troops on new battlefronts all over the galaxy. The Acclamator was a tough little ship, with neutronium-impregnated armor and powerful deflector shields. While it wasn't as heavily armored as some larger warships, it could take a beating before systems started to fail, and unlike the Venator, it didn't have any major weak spots. As far as weapons went, the Acclamator was a beast, with 12 quad turbo lasers, 24-point defense guns, and 4 heavy torpedo tubes bearing dozens of torpedoes each. That might not sound like much, but it was more anti-capital firepower than the Venator had, and with a better spread across the ship's hull. Those turbo lasers were located along the broadsides on both the dorsal and ventral surfaces, while the torpedo tubes were forefacing and the point defense guns lined the edge of the entire ship. Additionally, sourcebooks state that those turbo lasers were rated at 200 gigatons per shot. This is absolutely absurd because that's the equivalent of 2,000 thermonuclear bombs. But it's safe to say that at the very least, those guns were really powerful. And we have yet to mention the torpedo tubes, which were the Acclamator's primary weapons and could crack open unshielded core ships with ease. The biggest selling points of the Acclamator, however, were its crew and complement. The Acclamator only required a crew of 700, which was absolutely nothing for a ship of its size. The Venator required a crew 10 times that size, while many smaller ships needed crews of at least 1,000. Considering the vast disparity relative to the Venator, it's possible the figure of 700 didn't include the engineers responsible for the assault ship's vast vehicle complement, but that's just a supposition on our part. Speaking of the Acclamator's complements, no ship in the Republic Navy came close to matching it. A single Acclamator could carry 16,000 clone troopers, the equivalent of almost 2 full 501st Legions. On top of a truly insane troop capacity, the Acclamator could carry 320 speeder bikes, 66 LAAT gunships, 14 LAAT carriers, 48 ATTEs, 36 SPHATs, and 11,250 tons of cargo. Just one Acclamator stocked to capacity could conquer your average colony world. All told, the Acclamator was extremely powerful. It was fast, it was tough, it had the firepower for both orbital bombardment and ship-to-ship combat, it could carry a whole army, it only required a tiny crew, and it was relatively cheap as far as warships went. A small fleet of these bad boys could conquer virtually any planet in the galaxy. The ships had the speed to get there before the enemy, the firepower to ruin any ships that got in their way, and the troop capacity to overwhelm any defending force. It wasn't a perfect design, of course, but all of its flaws could be solved by either deploying more Acclamators or deploying Acclamators of a different variety. Consider, for example, the Acclamator's total lack of starfighters. The stock model had no starfighter-capable hangars, and while it could deploy LAAT gunships in that role if necessary, there were variants that did carry starfighters. One variant had starfighter hangars in place of the vehicle hold, allowing the ship to carry 200 V-19 Torrents into battle, while another featured 8 starfighter-capable hangars built along its sides. These had a smaller capacity than the previous variant, but preserved the Acclamator's vehicle base. These variants were rare due to the development of the Venator, but it's worth noting that 2 carrier Acclamators could almost match a Venator's fighter capacity while requiring less than 20% of a Venator's crew between them. We mentioned earlier that, though tough, a single Acclamator would struggle against a larger capital ship. However, this problem has a simple solution: bring in more Acclamators. For the price of 5 Venator-class Star Destroyers and the crew of just 1, you could get 10 Acclamators, which together would boast over 100 of those mega powerful turbo lasers, 1,000 core ship cracking missiles to lob around, and 160,000 clone troopers to deploy. The numbers get really crazy when you look at certain Venator heavy Clone Wars battles and work out how many Acclamators they could have manned with their crews. Remember the Battle of Ryloth, where the Republic struggled to punch through the Separatist blockade with 3 Star Destroyers? If the crews of those vessels were distributed across Acclamator-class assault ships, Anakin could have rolled up to that battle with 30 Acclamators and dunked on the blockade so hard that Wat Tambor probably would have surrendered on the spot. So, there you have it. The Acclamator-class assault ship was absurdly good, a beast of a warship that deserves more attention than it gets. But what do you think? Do you think the Clone Wars would have gone any differently if the Republic Navy did the math on crew requirements and decided to blot out the stars with Acclamators? Free to post your thoughts in the comments section below, and as always guys, thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.